Deoxys is perhaps the most mysterious Pokemon ever created. In the Ruby Pokédex it says, the DNA of a space virus underwent a sudden mutation upon exposure to a laser beam and resulted in Deoxys. The crystalline organ on this Pokemon's chest appears to be its brain. What a creative backstory for such an interesting Pokemon. Deoxys is beloved for this reason. It has a sense of mystique, of intrigue, that not many other Pokemon can say that they have, especially due to its mythical status and difficulty to obtain when it was released. In official VGC events, Deoxys is not legal to use, because it's a mythical, but Deoxys has a storied history in the competitive singles community, where its 4 different forms have all had their ups and downs over the years. When you look at Deoxys, you may think it's outdated by modern standards, with its psychic typing and unimpressive ability Pressure, 2 traits that have been serious detriments to other Pokemon in modern times. But amazingly, Deoxys is hanging on to pretty solid viability. It is true that Deoxys speed has fallen down to OU for the first time in its career, but many people don't realize that Deoxys speed is actually still pretty common and viable in Gen 9 Ubers, and Deoxys attack is holding on fairly well in Gen 9, outranking plenty of other legendaries from its age that have fallen off a cliff in viability. Deoxys is defined by its versatility with multiple forms and a incredibly vast move pool, as well as insanely min-maxed stats. And I guess this has aged pretty well. Why don't we take a look at Deoxys and its interesting history, and how this fan-favorite mythical is faring in the modern times as well. Deoxys debuted in the Generation 3 games, and it had the interesting gimmick of multiple different forms. The base form of Deoxys is the least popular, with the most balanced stat distribution. It has 150 in attack, special attack, and speed, and 50 in all of its defensive stats. Deoxys Attack is the most popular form, as it is more min-maxed for an offensive role. It has a far more impressive 180 base attack and special attack, and the same speed stat as Deoxys base form. It has lower defenses, but base form Deoxys had such low defenses anyway that this is barely a difference, and the increased offensive prowess is much more desirable. Then there is Deoxys Speed, who for a very long time was the fastest thing in the whole game. This guy has 180 speed and much better defenses than the other 2 forms mentioned so far, with 90 in special defense and defense. The trade-off though is that your attack and special attack are far lower. Deoxys Speed is more of a fast utility Pokemon. And then there is Deoxys Defense form, with its stats excelling more in defense and special defense, with 160 base in each, and an actually impressive 90 base speed as well. I think that the insanely min-maxed stats on Deoxys added to its mystique at the time. You didn't really see Pokemon like this back then, with 180 attack and 0 defense. Pokemon weren't designed like that back then, so Deoxys Attack kind of felt ahead of its time. And in Gen 3 Ubers, Deoxys Attack was by far the most popular of its form. This guy has an incredibly good offensive move pool. On the special side, you have options like Thunderbolt and Ice Beam, the classic combo, and Psycho Boost, a pretty excellent psychic stab option. On the physical side, Deoxys Attack has the rare Superpower, which is incredible fighting coverage, Extreme Speed for priority, Shadow Ball, which is incredible in this meta, full of Mewtwo and Latios, and then Rock Slide, which is great against Ho-Oh and Lugia and other flying types. Deoxys Attack can run many different sets. The most popular, though, is leaning into the physical side because of how great Extreme Speed and Shadow Ball are in the metagame. Priority is always useful, and especially hard-hitting priority like this, off such an incredible attack stat. And Shadow Ball is just such excellent coverage for the meta. The best switch into Shadow Ball is Snorlax, who gets decimated by Superpower. This physical coverage is just really incredible, and Deoxys Attack represents such a threat to almost the entire metagame. And Deoxys Attack is central to Gen 3, and it's the reason priority is such an important part of Gen 3 Ubers. Because Deoxys Attack has 0 defenses, its defenses are paper. any old priority move will eliminate this. And also, even a very weak Pursuit will eliminate Deoxys attack on the way out. You commonly see Metagross with Pursuit in Gen 3 Ubers because it is pretty good at handling and living Deoxys attacks hits with its nice typing and trapping it and getting rid of it with Pursuit. You actually also sometimes see Skarmory with Pursuit, which is a little bit unorthodox, isn't it? Using Pursuit, Skarmory can actually eliminate Deoxys attack even though it's got almost no special attack, just because the guy is that weak. It's interesting how the metagame has developed around this Pokemon, because due to this priority and Pursuit gaming, which is the most powerful counterplay to Deoxys attack, base form Deoxys has a small niche. The small niche of base form Deoxys is that with certain bulk, it can live these weak pursuits that people use to catch Deoxys attack. Since it has 50 defense and special defense, it is able to survive Pursuit from Metagross and Skarmory, where Deoxys attack will not. It requires you to sacrifice a lot of offensive stats, but sometimes that's worth it to be able to live those extremely common pursuits that exist to trap Deoxys attack. I think this is the only generation where base form Deoxys has any niche whatsoever. Otherwise, it's completely outclassed by attack form. But that's kind of interesting, isn't it? The third best Deoxys form in the original game is actually Deoxys Defense. Deoxys Defense can be used as an aggressive spike setting lead with Taunt and good enough base defenses to stomach just about any hit in the game. It actually commonly runs max speed, reaching 306 speed, allowing it to taunt a lot of other spike setting enemies while setting layers itself and getting ahead of the hazard game. You would think Deoxys Speed is much better at this, but actually Deoxys Defense does a better job because of its bulk. You can also use Deoxys Defense on stall teams with its incredible options of Recover and Knockoff, which are stall classics, and Pressure too, which is useful on a defensive Pokemon. Then there's Deoxys Speed, who is the worst of the Deoxys forms in Gen 3 Ubers. Deoxys Speed just doesn't really do anything that the others don't do better. You can only run one Deoxys form on a team, so Deoxys Speed is taking that slot away from what could be your Deoxys attack. And setting spikes quickly is just not useful enough to justify that. And Deoxys Defense has more mid-game value than Deoxys Speed with its superior defenses. In this original game, there is a serious gap between Deoxys attack and all of the other forms. This one is the best by far, and some even go as far as to argue that Deoxys attack is an S-tier Pokemon, alongside the metagame-defining Groudon, Kyogre, and Latios. Deoxys attack is absolutely imperative to have an answer for, and is so fast and so threatening with such an incredibly wide variety of options that it excels on almost any team. Even if you are prepared for it and run Pursuit and Priority, it is difficult to stop this Pokemon from getting value and getting at least one KO. It'll probably cause some damage before it goes down. It is like this incredibly ridiculous offensive resource that both players have access to that they're trying to squeeze the most out of to get an edge, which does create for some interesting gameplay. In the very next gen though, things were flipped upside down, as the worst of the Deoxys forms became the best overnight. Deoxys Speed is now the highest ranked and probably most impactful on the metagame of Gen 4 Ubers. That's because of the addition of one move to the game, that being Stealth Rock. Stealth Rock was a new entry hazard that I'm sure you all know deals damage based on the enemy's weakness to rock, and it is extraordinarily powerful in competitive singles to the point where getting rocks on the field before your opponent is worth losing an entire Pokemon. It's more valuable than a whole Pokemon slot. And Deoxys Speed is the fastest thing in the game that learns Stealth Rock. So it's no surprise that it is this good. It is the best thing at the game at just getting rocks on the field on turn 1. And for this reason, there is a whole lead metagame around Deoxys Speed on turn 1 getting Stealth Rock. Now, if you don't know, this is before Team Preview existed, and your lead was locked in from the beginning. So you couldn't choose your lead based on what you see they have on their team. You have to just pick your lead and blindly go with it on turn 1 with no information. So Deoxys Speed was a great lead. It's probably the best and most popular lead in the whole game just because it's fast and it gets rocks up against anything else, really. And for this reason, there was Deoxys Speed counterplay that emerged. People started running stuff like Choice Scarf Darkrai to outrun Deoxys Speed and KO with Dark Pulse, or put it to sleep to stop it from setting Stealth Rock. Deoxys Speed carries a Focus Sash, so Tyranitar was a popular one. Even though you can't stop them from setting Stealth Rock, you can at least KO them, and then they die to the Sandstorm after being brought down to 1 HP from Focus Sash. Deoxys Speed started to strike back as it began running a Choice Scarf, specifically to outrun Choice Scarf Darkrai and get Stealth Rock up on turn 1, even if it had to die in the process. In an absolutely absurd turn of events, Deoxys Speed needs to be even faster. That's how important it is to get rocks up on turn 1. And it's not just Stealth Rock that makes Deoxys Speed so good, it's also Spikes. If it lives the hit and gets another layer of Spikes, that's even better. It also has Taunt, it has Extreme Speed, it has Superpower for the Tar matchup, and because of that Tar matchup, you would sometimes see Colbur Berry Deoxys Speed to live that crunch and strike back against the Tyranitar. So Deoxys Speed is the most common Pokemon you're going to see on the first turn of the game, and the whole early game of Gen 4 Ubers is all about how the hell do I answer Deoxys Speed. A lot of the time anyway. Deoxys Attack had some new tools of its own, though, and it's pretty outstanding in its own right in Gen 4 Ubers. The physical special split happened in this generation, giving you a lot more offensive options. Shadow Ball is now a special attack. You have the elemental punches as forms of physical coverage you previously never had. Access to superpower is huge when Dialga is the new #1 Pokemon in the metagame, and hitting Dialga super effectively is really valuable. Thunder is huge against Kyogre, just as it was last gen, and Extreme Speed is just always incredibly good. Deoxys Attack has Stealth Rock itself if it wants to throw a bit of utility in the mix and not just be an offensive threat. Signal Beam is a new option for a special attack that is pretty interesting as a middle ground to hit Psychic types and Dark types. And the new item Life Orb is also a great option on Deoxys Attack. I mean, this Pokemon was so good in Gen 3 where there is such limited options for offensive items. It was using Pataya Berry and using Substitute to activate that, which is pretty unreliable. It was using Spell Tag for ghost damage, not the best. Now it has Life Orb, which is kind of perfect. Grants 1.3x damage to all your attacks, with the drawback of recoil every time you attack. That recoil is just not a big deal on a Pokemon that dies to any hit anyway. Your health is not that important on this, it's just being faster than the enemy and threatening it right then and there. And being able to hit more damage ranges with a Life Orb is absolutely enormous. We've talked about Focus Sash, of course, on Deoxys Speed, which is such a good new item for all the Deoxys forms here, allowing them to overcome their frailty and live one extra hit. It's great on Deoxys Speed and Deoxys Attack. Unfortunately, base form Deoxys and defense form Deoxys are pretty atrocious in Gen 4 Ubers. Base form Deoxys has the slightest tiny bit of merit as a lead over Deoxys Attack because the bulk is a bit more important in the lead slot than offensive power. And you might be able to live some hits that Deoxys Attack would not, but overall Deoxys Speed and Attack are both outclassing base form Deoxys. Deoxys Defense is also having a tough time actually walling things in this game. Its defenses are impressive, but it only has 50 base HP and gets really destroyed by a lot of neutral hits in this game. The Kyogre Water Spouts or the Draco Meteors from the Dialgas and Palkias of the world. It's a high power level metagame, especially compared to last gen, and Deoxys Defense is just not as effective. And Pokemon like Blissey and Steel types, OU ranked Pokemon, are more useful defensively than this guy who doesn't have the best typing for it either. Weak to all the new Dark and Ghost type attacks running around, and overall just bad at its job at Deoxys Defense, regrettably, with the significant power level increase here on offensive Pokemon. Gen 5 was a slightly adversarial environment for Deoxys, for a few reasons. The addition of Team Preview actually made Deoxys Speed a little bit worse as a lead, because it appreciated the blind lead matchup scenario. It is good when you don't know what you're up against, and because of its high speed and consistency setting Stealth Rock, it is just reliable. But the enemy can now see that you have a Deoxys Speed and pick something to counter it. Whether that be a Choice Scarf that is faster, or a Rapid Spinner that can 1v1 the Deoxys Speed and get ahead of it in the hazard game. Various other things. There are just more options for your opponent to counteract the Deoxys Speed lead. In Gen 5 Ubers, the Arceus forms are also legal now, which are problematic for Deoxys because Arceus commonly carries Extreme Speed on its normal type set, This is bad not only for Deoxys speed, but for Deoxys attack, who can be eliminated by that priority option. The presence of Genesect is also kind of bad news for all Deoxys forms, as this is a bug steel type with a very powerful U-turn that gets buffed by the ability download, and Choice Scarf Genesect will outrun Deoxys attack, which is tough. But despite all these problems, the Deoxys attack and speed forms are still highly ranked and popular in Gen 5 Ubers. In fact, they are both ranked in the same tier this time, considered equals. Despite team preview and despite more counterplay, Deoxys speed is still among the best leads in the whole game at setting hazards very quickly and starting the game off with aggression. High speed, access to spikes, taunt, and even the new magic coat, which was changed in Gen 5 to have a magic bounce-like effect. It will bounce back certain moves, including enemy hazards. So if the enemy tries to make hazards against you, you can magic coat predictably and bounce them back, which is a pretty interesting option. This also works against status ailments that they might try to inflict, such as Thunderwave or Toxic. And although Deoxys attack is suffering quite a bit from the presence of Arceus and the presence of Genesect, it also kind of benefits from the new edition of Team Preview, because you can see exactly what your opponent has and how good your coverage is on Deoxys attack. Before, you were a bit more in the dark on that front, and you had to reveal their team over the course of a game to see how good your Deoxys attack was and whether it could finish the game off. But now, you can more easily set up for your Deoxys attack, maybe even run a rapid spinner to maintain its focus sash, live that Arceus extreme speed, survive on one, and strike back with a superpower. With more information available to you, it's easier to set up for your Deoxys attack and get more out of it in some ways. And Deoxys attack is just a Pokemon that it ages well. It is always offensively threatening, and with its wide coverage, it can adapt to different metagames. And I think this is a point further emphasized when we talk about Gen 6 Ubers. This is usually the point where if you're a Psychic type, you fall off a cliff, because Ghost types rose significantly in Gen 6 as they become better offensively, no longer resisted by Steel. The new knockoff is released, and being a Psychic type is now an active detriment most of the time. But the thing about Deoxys attack is that the defensive shortcomings of being a Psychic type don't really matter when you die to anything anyway and you're designed around that. Deoxys attack's defensive typing is as good as it was back in Gen 3, even though there were less super effective moves back then to worry about. Super effective or not, you're dying to a slight breeze, so being Psychic is not a detriment to Deoxys attack defensively. It has gotten worse offensively, you could say, but in many generations, Deoxys attack is not even using its Psychic stamp. Deoxys attack has always been about its coverage options, its vast move pool, which can adapt to any environment, and it doesn't rely on stab for its damage source. It has such high attack and special attack that it doesn't need same type attack bonus to dish out significant damage. So in Gen 6, Uber's Deoxys attack is an A rank Pokemon, which is impressive, and it's the highest ranked Deoxys form in this generation. Deoxys has always had knockoff in its moveset, but now with the buff to knockoff, Deoxys attack can use this option for incredible dark coverage on the physical side. And this is a pretty significant buff for Deoxys, actually. Psycho Boost is doing huge neutral damage to Primal Groudon. Ice Beam is now hitting the all-new Mega Salamence and a Veltal. Extreme Speed can play around Sucker Punch from a Veltal. Superpower is of course hitting Blissey. Deoxys attack is still powerful enough to frighten all of these new adversaries and give them a lot of trouble. And the same is true as Deoxys speed. Making Stealth Rock really fast and having Taunt has not stopped being useful. It hasn't. These guys are aging very well. Now, Deoxys took a pretty big hit in Gen 7 with metagame shifts that were unfavorable. The addition of powerful new Steel types that match up well against Deoxys and aren't even aiming to answer Deoxys was a problem. Necrozma Duskmane was added to the game here, and Necrozma Duskmane shrugs off most of Deoxys coverage. It's neutral to Steel, and Superpower has been the main way to hit Steel types for generations. So that's not going to work. You resist Psycho Boost, you resist Ice Beam, you shrug off most other neutral hits, and there is Knockoff and Dark Pulse, but these can actually have a unintentionally poor effect in activating weakness policy on Necrozma Duskmane. If they're carrying a Z-Stone knockoff, will also deal less damage and be pretty easily handled. The other terrible new addition to the meta for Deoxys was Megiana, who feels kind of impossible to answer. And it resists Dark, which is a nightmare. The best coverage you have for this is probably Fire Punch, which is not a fantastic option. It's a weak attack, and it's not going to be that popular in general. So the popularity of these two new steel types are terrible for Deoxys attack, actually, but not so terrible that it's completely unviable. It has taken a hit to its viability, but it resides around the B rank, which I think is still respectable, considering that power creep is increasing. Gen 7 is a very powerful generation, and Deoxys attack still does pose a threat to a wide array of things. And there is some new synergy for Deoxys attack with Tapu Lele as a possible teammate. Even in Ubers, you sometimes saw Psychic Terrain Hyper Offense with Terrain Extender. And Deoxys attack fits well on those teams, having its Psycho boost powered up in Psychic Terrain, and also benefiting from priority immunity, shielding it from the most common way it's been dealt with for years. Mega Sableye also rose in popularity at Gen 7 Ubers because it's pretty good at handling Groudon Primal with defense investment. You can do a lot of damage against them with foul play, you can toxic them and have the bulk to actually 1v1 them pretty well. And Deoxys Speed happens to hate that, because Deoxys Speed gets its focus sash broken from Fake Out, and it can't immediately Stealth Rock against Mega Sableye, fearing Magic Bounce. Deoxys Speed can run Skill Swap to play around Magic Bounce, as it will trade abilities with the enemy. But this requires an entire turn. It's not the most elegant play to make in the world, and they are so good at breaking your sash, which is very awkward. Aggressive teams still like having a fast rock setter, but Primal Groudon and Necrozma Duskmane are new popular rock setters that fit on most teams, so that also kind of takes this job away from Deoxys Speed a little bit. Even though some teams do enjoy this, it is less of a prevalent concept here. And that brings us to the modern day, because Deoxys was not present in Gen 8. Now my assertion that these guys have survived power creep could be put to the test. Unfortunately, not every Deoxys form has survived power creep. Deoxys Defense definitely has not, as it now resides in the NUBL tier, despite its great stats, and move pool, and utility. Being a defensive psychic type in the modern climate is a death sentence, and it's so bad that not even this mythical beast from space can manage it. Defensive Pokemon have gotten more powerful. We have Regenerator Pokemon. We have Pokemon with status immunity like Garganacl. Deoxys defense feels quite outdated actually, and it just doesn't function well in this role anymore. Base form Deoxys has always been an awkward Pokemon, and it also isn't very good in modern Ubers. It's at least still ranked Ubers because of its high stats, but it doesn't have much to do. But amazingly, Deoxys Attack and Deoxys Speed have kind of survived power creep, I think. Now, I should address the elephant in the room. Yes, Deoxys Speed did fall to OU, and in OU, it isn't even necessarily that overpowered. Yes, it is incredibly fast, but ever since Gen 8, heavy-duty boots are in the game. Making rocks really quickly is no longer that powerful of a concept. Being a psychic type sucks defensively, as we've established. Pressure is a pretty useless ability on this Pokemon, and Deoxys Speed in OU is used as a hazard setter sometimes, yes, but also it's used for its offensive tools and utility options like Taunt and Light Screen and Reflect. A few generations ago, this would have been too much for OU, but in Gen 9, that's not the case. This is a fine Pokemon in OU, but a Pokemon being balanced for OU doesn't necessarily mean that it's unviable in Ubers. There are many examples where some of the best Pokemon in Ubers are OU Pokemon, like Ferrothorn and Megiana, and Snorlax back in Gen 3. In Gen 9 Ubers, Deoxys Speed finds itself in the B+ rank, alongside solid metagame Pokemon like Giratina Origin and Ting Lu. I actually think this is a very impressive rank. And Deoxys Speed is doing the same exact thing it always has been doing in Gen 9 Ubers. It's good for similar reasons. It's high speed and it's great utility move pool. You can survive hits from Koraidon at full HP as well, and chip it down with Rocky Helmet. impact as you're getting your progress through. It's pretty good. The speed benchmark you can hit and the bulk benchmark at the same time is really nice in a world where the two top threats of the format are incredibly fast and hard for most things to outrun. So Deoxys speed can set its hazards, survive a hit from a lot of things, and then do something useful after that, whether it's setting a layer of spikes, taunting something, statusing something, knocking off an item, dealing damage with Psycho Boost, or this guy is surprisingly good at doing its job in this metagame. Deoxys attack finds itself in the B rank in Gen 9 Ubers, which I also think is pretty respectable. Deoxys attack also outruns both Zacian Crown and Corridor, which is a more important speed benchmark than ever. Doesn't have the benefit that Deoxys speed has of actually surviving hits from them, but as an offensive threat, it actually just one-hits Corridor every time. Low kick can deal decent damage to Zacian Crowns, and it still feels pretty widely threatening to a lot of the metagame. It really helps that low kick can deal great damage to Ting Lu, who is a popular defensive Pokemon in Gen 9 Ubers. Shadow Ball is good as a coverage option not only for Necrozma Duskmane, but for Calyrex Ice Rider, a new face that you can frighten with massive damage here. Ho-Oh is also better than ever, in a top tier position in Gen 9, so your option of Rock Slide is feeling pretty excellent too, isn't it? And Magearna, while it's still ranked Ubers, is not really used here like it was back in Gen 7, so you can be very thankful for that there's not this common Pokemon that kind of destroys you. So yes, even though Deoxys attack and speed are psychic types, one of the worst types in modern Pokemon that has been a death sentence for formerly great competitive mainstays. And they both have the ability Pressure, which is useless and is a point of serious turmoil for many other legendaries who have that auto-include Pressure ability and feel weighed down by it, as it is just useless in modern times. Despite these traits, Deoxys attack and Deoxys speed are surprisingly functional in modern times, doing what they did back at their peaks. Deoxys attack can operate well as an offensive threat rather independently of its typing. While other Pokemon suffered significantly from Psychic getting worse and worse over the years, Deoxys attack feels about the same, since it's so frail anyway that its defensive typing doesn't really matter. On the offensive side, Psycho Boost actually feels good in current meta, and even though its stab has obvious counterplay with dark types, it's a Pokemon that has always relied more on its coverage than its stab, so this idea from the beginning has just aged pretty well. It is having struggles in modern gens for sure, but it's surviving much better than most other old legendaries. And maybe that's because the design of this Pokemon to begin with is sort of future-proof, in a way. Deoxys speed feels much the same. While it has suffered more from the Psychic typing getting worse over time, the idea of being a fast utility Pokemon is a universal one that is always good. Deoxys speed is still appreciated for its high speed and vast options that give it continued viability in Gen 9 Ubers. Isn't it interesting that Deoxys has been hit harder by defensive power creep than offensive power creep? People often focus more on offensive power creep, but the rise of, powerful defensive abilities and broken utility and stuff has made Deoxys defense feel atrocious. But Deoxys attack is still pretty good, even in a world where Pokemon are getting more and more offensively powerful as every game releases. And that's why I think Deoxys has survived power creep pretty well. What do you think though? Do you think I'm talking nonsense? Please let me know down below in the comments, and thank you very much for watching.